a seat. I brought some of my cultural heritage with me. I live in the east coast of Canada, Nova Scotia. Now, I wasn't born there, but in the east coast of Canada, there's a lot of music that goes on, and they play the spoons. Do you know what this is? Well, this is a fake instrument that plays the spoon, but it goes like this. So I'll give you a 5-minute concert now if I... No, I won't. But that was my annoying noise maker, and I'm going to jump up because we're going to have a bit of music later and play the spoons. All right. Is everybody seated and ready to go? So, we have a very interesting session here. We talked about internal partnerships, and now we're going to go to the external partnerships. For this session, we're going to be talking about the private-public partnerships, research, education. There's a number of themes, some great discussants. They'll be moderated by my new friend and colleague, Herman. Herman is from Wageningen. Now, tell me how to really pronounce that. Wageningen. Wageningen. Gee whiz, that's such a good name. But he's over there. He's the senior advisor for the UR Center for Development and Innovation, and really specializes in multi-stakeholder engagement for sustainable and inclusive agriculture. So obviously the right person here. He's also the lead author of this MSP guide, How to Design and Facilitate Multi-Stakeholder Partnerships. He's a PBA partnership broker, which I am as well. I never told you that. It's a very good program on partnerships that walks you through how to really do it. I'd recommend it to all of you. Herman, would you please take over?
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for kind of being here and allowing me also to share kind of this session with you. And you've been talking about partnering internally within the bank. And this session, of course, we're going to look outside and look at who do we want to bring along. And as Stephen already introduced me, I work with a university, yet I'm very much a practitioner person working in practice with partnerships, trying to solve their problems, trying to help them strategize and build capacity for partnering. And one of the first questions you need to ask about this topic is, well, do we actually need to partner? Are there other solutions to solving or to reaching our goals than to do it in partnerships? And of course, I think over the last few days, the analysis that you've been doing together is basically that in order to move from agricultural production paradigm to a more food system paradigm requires an awful lot of kind of new insights, new collaboration, new leveraging of resources. So this is the time where I think it's appropriate for all kind of sectors to invest in partnerships or in working together and engaging better. And yeah, so this session we have invited a couple of partners of the World Bank, and of course we could not invite the whole range of partners, so we've tried to be a little bit selective and come up with a group of people who really have long-term insights in not only working with the bank, but also working and engaging with many, many other partners, actors. And of course, when we say partners, it could be private sector, it could be science, and you will get some examples of that this morning. Of course, the bank also partners with civil society actors, with local governments and with national governments. All these type of potential partners and all kinds of combinations of these partners are possible. And I know that the bank is already engaged in a lot of it, but basically the message of today is, if you're going to do more of it, how can you get better at it? Because that's the second point I wanted to make this morning. If everybody agrees that collaboration and partnerships are so important, why are we so notoriously bad at it? We see lots of partnerships that start off but go nowhere. We see lots of kind of things happen in partnerships that don't really deliver the synergies that we all were dreaming about. And I think by having this panel, we hope to kind of go a little bit deeper into those questions, what works and what doesn't work in partnerships. So the way we're going to work is that the three panelists will each give a presentation, and you'll be able to ask questions for clarification after each presentation, just one or two. Then afterwards, we'll have a session where you can, submit questions in writing, and we'll take as many as we can, in order to have a good conversation with everybody. Now, our panelists, I'll introduce them very briefly. First, we've got Dr. John McDermott from IFPRI. And John is the Director, Agriculture for Nutrition and Health Program at IFPRI, but he's got a long history in working in animal health, livestock, and also human health issues, and has also a long history in working with the bank and with many other organizations, including with my university, Wageningen University and Research in the Netherlands. So further, we have Professor Ronnie Kaufman, and Ronnie is working with Cornell University, and he's involved in a lot of different initiatives, and I'll get to that in a minute just before his presentation starts. And we're very pleased to have Elizabeth Fay with us, and she's the Director of Policy and Advocacy at Cargill, and we'll get to you also later on. So first, I'd like to invite John to come and share your story.
And good morning, everyone. Now, I would like to start with just giving you a brief overview of the CGIAR system, and it has strong linkages with the World Bank. Jürgen, for example, is the chair of the System Council, which is kind of the oversight of the CGIAR. On the bottom is the website, and it's going to be a portal for how you get into the CGIAR. But what's to remember? There's 15 independent research centers, and there's 11 approved kind of large research programs that cut across centers, and then an additional 3 platforms. And the goals of these kind of broader research programs are very consistent with the goals that Global Ag is doing in the World Bank. Reduce poverty, food and nutrition security, natural resources, and then cross-cutting themes of climate change, gender, equity, capacity, and policy. So we're a good fit. Now, who do you call if you want to work with the CGIAR? Well, one place you can start is with the centers, and there's 15 of these, and they're fiercely independent. They're located in all the places where you're interested in working, and you can see from their names describe what they're doing. So they have technical expertise in different areas of agriculture and food policy, etc. They also have pretty good networks in their host countries and in their host regions as well, which can be quite valuable. Then the other group you can call are on the research programs, and the ones in yellow on your left, my left, are really the ones that are very much tied to the traditional business of the CGIAR and to the centers. And so you can kind of link into those. What I want to talk about more in terms of partnerships with you are the integrative CRPs, the integrative programs that bring together a number of centers plus a number of external partners working on larger issues, whether it's nutrition and health, climate change, policy and markets, or water, land, and ecosystems. Now, one of the nice things about these programs from your point of view is they've already they're wholesalers in a sense for partnerships. So if you look at the Agriculture for Nutrition and Health program, which I lead, we have 5 kind of major thematic areas. So one is on food systems for healthier diets, biofortification, and you heard one of my colleagues, Adewale from Harvest Plus, speaking the other day, food safety, integrated nutrition programs and policies, and One Health. And they bring together an important collection of partners. So Wageningen University is leading food systems, Harvest Plus is leading biofortification, ILRI's leading food safety with a strong input from IITA, IFPRI leads the work on policies and programs for nutrition, and we have a joint venture on One Health between ILRI and the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine. And I'll talk about a subset of these in terms of kind of case studies. Now, I think one of the things that we're very interested in, and I think you are too, is we have a large portfolio of research, maybe $17, $18 million a year, that looks at the what and how of how agriculture can influence improved nutrition. It has a lot of additional things in terms of nutrition education, in terms of gender work, etc. So that's kind of one portal. But we're very interested in linking this up to multi-sectoral contributions because you don't really accomplish nutrition without stunting reduction without a multi-sectoral approach. And so I think this is one area where there's a lot of potential, and you probably were talking about it in your internal partnerships last session. The area which I want to emphasize more is on food systems, because I know that's an area of interest for this group. And perhaps yourselves, certainly in the CGIR, we're very much supply push oriented. And how do we start with demand, get people focused on demand and on food, not just on commodities and food consumption? How do we reshape demand? One of our premises is that this has to be very much oriented to countries. That the system, and if you look at those photos on the right, the food systems are very different in different countries. So how do we work with countries, and how do we do that? And then we have to expand the range of partners. If you think of most low and middle income countries, the commercial sectors are really starting to grow. A lot of them are small and medium enterprises. How do we get these partnerships across sectors, government, civil society, and commercial? We have a specific program I mentioned called Food Systems for Healthier Diets, and we're trying to focus this. We have 4 focus countries that we're looking at right now, which bring together a lot of CGIR capacity: Nigeria, Ethiopia, Bangladesh, and Vietnam, and then a number of spillover countries. And what we're really focusing on are 3 research areas within these national food systems. So one is to help on the kind of food consumption, food quality side in terms of diagnosis and then dietary and nutrition transitions. The other is on food systems innovation, and this is a kind of public-private partnership area. And the other is on the more policy and enabling side with anchoring and scaling up. And I guess our thinking in the countries is that countries are really trying to think about consumption and demand in a way they haven't done before. They're interested in enabling the private sector, especially their SMEs. They know that they need a balance of policy and enabling with the food system transformation, and it looks differently when you're a low-income country than when you're a middle or emerging economy. And they know that they need capacity, so those are focuses. So let me talk about one of the countries where we're doing this, and that's Ethiopia. And there are a number, and I won't repeat them, kind of issues where there's either joint activities between the bank and the CGIR researchers, or areas where they could be emerging, and we're in discussions on these now. I think one of the things for these lower income countries like Ethiopia is they're very dynamic. They're growing quite quickly, and they're trying to enable the SME, but still the agri-food transformation is largely agricultural transformation, and it's not so much into the food side yet. They are making good progress on kind of cross-sectoral pieces like agriculture and health, but there's real needs for capacity. So these kind of focus countries, I think, with country work are important. One kind of long-standing area in food systems that we've been working with the bank, I think quite effectively over 10 years or so, is in Vietnam on food safety. And the specific niche of the kind of CGIAR research has been on fresh foods in domestic markets, and the kind of risk analysis and how you manage risk in those systems, often where they're not regulated and where you don't have the expertise that you need. We feel that in food safety there's good understanding of kind of the incentives around commercial food markets, export markets and things like that, and private sector and how those are regulated are well understood. It's a question of capacity. But for informal markets for fresh food, less well understood. I've also contacted some of my colleagues in Climate Smart Agriculture who are working with you, the Climate Change Agri-Food System, CRP. I understand that they have a couple of people who actually work with the Ag Climate Group here. And it's very much their emphasis in working with you is on targeting, on planning ahead and then helping countries plan. And this has been done in a number of countries. One that's more advanced is in Kenya, and there's been a lot of work done in Western Kenya on kind of looking at value chains and their risks associated with climate change, and then how those can be dealt with, and is being kind of studies in specific counties in Kenya and how those are rolling out, which can then really help government and county-level government to work on these things. So another example of kind of global partnerships, but then also getting them down into countries. And finally, I wanted to, I've been doing a kind of partnerships with the World Bank. A lot of my former colleagues in the CGIR are in the audience as members of the World Bank. So I wanted to share a few reflections on kind of what works, what hasn't worked, and where we might want to focus, because we can't do everything. So one is at the more strategic knowledge level, and I think you already understand the kind of case for food systems, nutrition, climate-smart agriculture, et cetera. So I think kind of pinning down these few areas of joint interest and really focusing on those is important. And it has to be a kind of longer-term relationship. To me, the kind of Vietnam food safety is a good one where we've engaged for a long period of time. I see a lot of potential around climate-smart agriculture, nutrition-sensitive agriculture in terms of those relationships. I think we have to be more formal and systematic about it. It's pretty informal now and can drop off, but we have to set up some teams of people who regularly talk to each other. We have done seconded staff in the past in a number of areas, and that's an option, but I think it really needs to be more of a partnership than just seconding somebody. And it's gonna, if it's gonna be planned and more formal, it's gonna need some funding support. Sometimes the donors help us out with this. For example, with EFAD, EFAD was looking to strengthen their nutrition-sensitive agriculture portfolio. They didn't really have the personnel or whatever to do it. The Canadians funded my program plus EFAD, and we actually seconded a person to go into EFAD and help them develop their strategy and then their programming. It could be with the funding envelope of the World Bank with the CGIR that we could carve out a piece of that for some of these more strategic partnerships that might be useful. I think at country level, one of the things we're trying to do is have a good team of researchers in the country, 4 or 5, who are working across our program, and I'm sure it's the same for climate change and for policies, institutions, and markets, who can give you easier entry and partnerships within the countries. And the CGIR is certainly going to be working more on that. But it could be that there's task forces. For example, in the food safety example I gave you, one of the nice things that ILRI, who was the CGIAR partner involved, is they worked with national partners to develop a kind of task force for risk assessment for these kind of fresh food informal market systems. And then that was able to link nicely into government efforts and to the kind of partnership between government, World Bank, national partners, and the CGIR, which is what I think needs to happen at country level. There are some challenges. The one thing that researchers don't understand is how operational the bank is. Okay, you're making loans, you're doing things, you're under deadlines. That's not a kind of research world. And so we're not very good at consultants or as consultants to you for those kinds of things. But definitely there's an opportunity to, with these kind of longer term partnerships that we need to develop more formally, to give that kind of more responsive things that you'll need on the operational side if we understand better the operations and how they link to the evidence and advice that you need. So let me stop there, and I'm looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you, John. There's time for a couple of questions of clarification, and the rules, unfortunately, are that you keep your questions short, 1 sentence maximum, no commas, and that you also, let's see what questions there are, and then we can maybe allow 1 or 2.
Herman, can I also just mention that the Q&A at the end will be again on written questions. So write down your questions on cards. This one's only for clarification. Write down who you'd like to address the question to, or maybe it's all. That helps us a lot, and we will collect those at the end of all the presentations. This is just for clarification.
Anybody?
1 clarification here. We need a microphone. Do we have a microphone, gentlemen, ladies? Fang, thank you very much. And you can just tell us again who you are. Thank you, Fang, for dashing over here. Very good. Thanks.
Hello, my name is Aifa. I am working at the World Bank based in Dakar, Senegal. My question is how New Research Institute can be part of the CGIAR, I would like to give an example. Under the West Africa Agricultural Productivity Program, we work with National Research Institute that we call National Center of Specialization, giving them all they need in terms of facility support, in terms of the equipment, in terms of human capacity, even through a program, PhD and master program. Now they are doing well with, as a result, generating new varieties, new technologies. How this center of National Center of Specialization that even are going to move to regional center of research can get involved on CGR to benefit the experience and maybe diversify the.
It's an excellent question because it's so grounded in what you're doing. I'll tell you what, maybe that kind of question we'll save to the end. Why don't you make a note of that? Because that's a great question that they need to address. And could you write that down for me? And so that we can really get them in there. And maybe we'll stick to clarifications just now. But this will be noted. It's coming your way.
Any other question?
It's just now, again, just clarifications now. Keep writing down your questions.
If I need I'm Francisco from the Bolivia country office. If I need a specialist from IFPRI in one project, do I need to hire him or her as a consultant, or is there any kind of collaboration or agreement or something like that? Just to clarify. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, that's a clarification.
That is. So, but that'll come in later in terms of can we set up some formal mechanisms to do this? Because sometimes you can get them and sometimes you can't. The problem is the best people are often busy and their time's paid for by other people, so it's not always straightforward to get the best people's time for consultancies. Yeah.
Let's move on.
Thanks very much. I'd like to introduce you to our next presenter, and Professor Ronnie Kaufman. I already mentioned that he's working with Cornell University, but I think it's also interesting to know that he actually was the recipient of the inaugural World Agriculture Prize in 2013, which was awarded by the Global Confederation of Higher Education Associations for the Agriculture and Life Sciences, supported by Nanjing Agricultural University. There's many other things that Ronnie has been involved in, and today I think you're also going to share something about the Land Grants Consortium initiative, so I look forward to what you have to share, Ronnie.
Thanks very much. It's good to be here. I have more things. I need 3 hands here, but I want to start by, before I get the pointer, I want to start by waving this around. There are 150 copies floating around here somewhere that we sent down. So hope you have access to a copy, and I hope you have a chance to read it. This is what I'm going to be talking about. So before I get into that, I was asked to say something about the future of agriculture, which is a bit of a challenge, but I have one slide that I think is, I've used it for a couple of years now, and each bar here represents 5 years. So you've got 50 years of what's been happening. So you can pretty well see there on the left a lot of food being generated on this side of the world, and a lot of it being shipped to the other side of the world. And I think you can see a 50-year trend in what's happening, particularly in Asia, particularly in the Middle East and Africa. Asia, of course, that's come from development with people eating a lot more meat, importing a lot more grain to feed them. Middle East and Africa, all of us who have spent time there over this, and I've been associated with these areas for almost 50 years. I began as a rice breeder at Erie in 1971. So you can see in the last 5-year increment, what was being imported into Africa and the Middle East increased by 50%. If we could update it, I asked Elizabeth for more information. You can see the source is Cargill, but she says those economists are no longer on the perch at Cargill. So anyway, this is a trend. It's caused by subsidies, subsidizing production on this side of the world, of course, and putting a lot of farmers on the other side of the world at a big disadvantage. So this is an intervention. You talk about we need a partnership to do something about this, because it is one of the greatest challenges that that we face. And you know, it's not going to get better by itself. Another challenge facing agriculture is global climate change. You're hearing a lot about it. There's a simple thing floating around. I just come from California, where we had a meeting of several universities. There, the wine growers are saying that the vintage has been earlier by 1 day every year for the past 40 years. So since I've been working, 40 days earlier due to climate change. So this is happening to us in a big way. I want to give you one example of wheat where a 1 degree increase in night temperature reduces yield by 10%. So in other words, about a ton per hectare. So we're facing some tremendous challenges for the future of agriculture, and we would like to be a part of that. I'm here to, this is not an exclusive club, but here you see a few of us that are involved in preparing this concept note. We welcome anybody in that wants to contribute. We think we're an underutilized resource, and we think, you know, I mean, I spent many years, I was trained in the CGIAR in wheat with Dr. Borlaug in Mexico, and I worked for 10 years as a rice breeder at Erie, so I'm a big supporter of the CGIAR. But I think our universities, just one of our universities, for instance, CG has a budget of perhaps $1 billion, I think, right around there. Cornell's budget is $3 billion. University of California's budget would, I don't know, way over $10 billion. So there's a lot of resource that's untapped, and we would really like to contribute. We had 4 framing questions, which you'll see in your. What are the priority needs for strengthening capacity? What forms of new collaborations are needed? How can we increase the relevance of our universities? And what are the opportunities for overcoming these constraints? So our comparative advantages, strengthening capacity. That's something that we do especially well, and we'd like to do more of it, and we'd like to do it where it's needed. Cornell, we've been involved in developing the West Africa Center for Crop Improvement, training plant breeders in Africa for Africa. They get their degrees in Africa, and they stay there and they make productive contributions. Second is decoupling increased productivity from negative environmental externalities. I think this was written by an economist. Externalities is kind of a word that's given it away. Focusing on food security and nutrition for sustainable development, and reducing post-harvest loss and food waste. So I'm going to give you an example of each one of these areas, and then I'll wrap up, hopefully on time.
Going well.
Good. So Agricultural Innovation Partnership. This is something that we started in India with support from USAID. The emphasis is on strengthening curriculum at the state agriculture universities, as well as extension programming. And it's a very simple model. We identify a capable faculty member at a state agriculture university. He or she comes here and is paired with a counterpart in one of our partner universities. We have 6 or 8 working as a part of this consortium. They spend a semester together teaching a course and revising the curriculum of that course that the faculty member will teach when he or she returns. And then the faculty member here makes several or a couple of extended visits after the counterpart faculty member returns. So it works really well to strengthen the curriculum, and partnerships are established between faculty members that endure and are cherished, actually, and they often go and find resources together. So that works so well that USAID asked us to shift it to Africa. We've been working with Malawi for quite some time. Here's an example of some of the folks in the field in Malawi, and it works equally well there. So this is something for that focus area that we're really enthusiastic about. The second focus area, decoupling the productivity from negative environmental externalities. Texas A&M has a good example. They have this innovative lab for small-scale irrigation, which I believe involves ILRI and IFPRI and IMI, several of the CGIAR institutions. And I think it operates in Ghana, Ethiopia perhaps, and maybe one other country in East Africa. So it basically makes efficient use of water in enhancing crop productivity. And it's supported by USAID, one of their innovation labs. Durable rust resistance in wheat. This is one of our major projects at Cornell. I was Borlaug's graduate student. In fact, I was his only graduate student. He hadn't had any students up in, the remote part of Mexico where he worked at the time. And I worked under him for a PhD. And while I was there, he won the Nobel Prize. Wow. Didn't take any more students. So I became the only one. We stayed in touch over the years. So when this new race of wheat rust came into East Africa, in Uganda in 1999, the entire global crop was susceptible. Borlaug was extremely upset, extremely worried. He was one of the few people old enough to have seen a stem rust epidemic. The last one in this country was 1953. But it's a terrible disease, probably the world's worst plant disease, and it can wipe out extraordinary amounts of the wheat crop. So we got a little money from USAID and USDA, and then Borlaug and I got together and wrote a proposal, and we got a lot of money for the Bill and Melinda Gates from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And we were very successful with that. We renewed it. We established these partnerships. I think this is almost the mother of all partnerships. John, we got 20 institutions around the world that were focused on rust involved, and it's been very successful. We've been able to deploy resistant varieties in the face of this, and so far we have not had an epidemic, even though, as you see in this photo, the presence of the thing has moved up and down the east coast of Africa and has jumped the Red Sea. So this is and now on the success of dealing with rust, the Gates Foundation has renewed this for a third phase that we call Delivering Genetic Gains in Wheat, which will focus on all the important traits for wheat, especially heat tolerance, as I was discussing earlier. We have another important partnership also involving the CG in the area of food security and nutrition. We call it NextGen or Next Generation Cassava Breeding. And this is applying the power of computing, really, what we call genomic selection, to the improvement of what plant breeders would call a very recalcitrant crop. It's difficult to improve cassava. It's clonally propagated. You make a cross between two clones. It just, segregates all over the place. But now, with the power of computers, we can sequence individual plants. We can identify the most appropriate parents. We've had extraordinary rates of genetic gain in doing this, and I'm 10% over a couple of cycles even. So I'll be going tomorrow to Nigeria. We're being invited to renew this project for a second phase, and it was identified by Bill and Melinda Gates as one of the 5 things that make them hopeful about Africa. So we're very proud of the achievements of this project. Here's a little something about the objectives. So finally, for the last area, reducing post-harvest loss and food waste, Davis has an outstanding program supported by USAID that they call the Horticulture Innovation Lab. So in summary, we're a group of universities, not an exclusive group. We'd like to contribute. We're we always emphasize knowledge for a public person, a public purpose, and we would like very much to work more effectively with you. So thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Ronnie. Any questions for clarification? Yes, please, over there, table number 14.
And remember to keep writing down your questions. We already know what the first one's going to be. Thank you, madam. And clarification only.
Yes, thank you. My name is Iftikhar Mustafa. Thank you, Ronnie. Just wanted to know, you showed the first slide there on the food, and you defined the food as cereals and so on. I was wondering if you're aware of a similar slide that takes into account vegetable, fruits, poultry, fish, and so on. Thank you.
I'm not aware of it, but I would be delighted to have it. Please send it along. Does it send the same message, I suppose? Yeah, good.
Thank you, Doctor. That was a fantastic presentation. My name is Kunda. I work with the South Asia region. Yesterday we had a very interesting presentation from the University of the District of Columbia, and it's a land-grant university. I was just curious to find out why it's not part of this consortium.
Well, as I said, this is not an exclusive consortium. They're welcome to be a part of it. So, in fact, it's a very large system of land-grant universities, and trying to bring them all on board at the same time was what I call an insurmountable opportunity. So, no one's excluded, but there's a group of 10, and we're trying to get ourselves organized, and then you all come.
That's the saying of the day, insurmountable opportunity. Last clarification. If you could tell us who you are.
Yeah, my name is Svetlana Edmits. I work in Latin America. I was wondering, what capacity do you have to deliver knowledge on the so-called orphan crops? Because in many countries, we can potentially support the development of these crops, and including, linking them to value chains, etc. So on the research side, the CGIAR centers sort of focus on a certain number of crops, but there are whole other ones that could be developed and need that knowledge behind them. Thanks.
Absolutely. I mean, universities have that potential, and I would say, in particular, the University of California system. I mean, they're a whole state of orphan crops. So we have it, and would be delighted to be involved. Yeah.
Okay, I'd like to move us on to the third presenter. And as you can see already, some type of patterns are starting to emerge with some of the presentations. There are offers, but there are also requests. And I think in partnerships, that's often where things start. And being clear about what you have to offer and being clear about what you want to request to others is, I think, a key. So having this conversation with this group is really helpful. And I'm delighted that we've got Elizabeth Fay with us from Cargill. Elizabeth has a long history with Cargill. Before that, she used to work at the US Senate as a policy advisor, but for Cargill, she's been doing work in many different places, Washington, in London, now back in Washington. And currently her focus is on to support the company's objectives in food security, nutrition, and sustainable supply chains as a director of policy and advocacy. And look forward to hear your perspective and your contribution.
Thank you. Thank you, and pardon me. Good morning, or I guess almost good afternoon. Delighted to be here, and thank you for the invitation today. I was really asked to give sort of the perspective of the private sector. So some of this will be related to Cargill, but I've tried to broaden it so that we're giving you a sense of the spectrum of public interests, private sector interests in public-private partnerships. So a little bit about Cargill. Some of you I know in the room know who Cargill is. We're not a household name. We are mainly a B2B company. We started 150 years ago on the banks of the Mississippi trading grain, and today we're in 70 countries around the world with over 150,000 employees directly working in the world's food system. We have business segments. We have a large grouping of businesses that we would classify across 4 main sectors: food, agriculture, financial risk management services, and then our industrial applications. What is somewhat unique about Cargill is that we straddle most global agricultural value chains at multiple points. Sometimes it's the entire chain. Other times it's intermediate points. But it is clearly a perspective that gives us an understanding of how the world's food system works and where there are opportunities to partner. Some of our customers, again, those that don't know Cargill, I think some might know these names on there. These are our main top strategic customer relationships, and they rely on Cargill every day to supply them their raw material or their food ingredients to support their businesses. The notion of partnership is one that's long embedded in the company. Have to say that most of our partnerships tend to have been with civil society or leading NGOs. Public-private partnerships are a relatively new area for Cargill, and that is in part, both on the public side, there in the past has been a hesitancy to partner with a company the size of Cargill. That's changed in recent years. We've seen significant increase in interest in various donors wanting to talk to companies like Cargill that have the breadth for many reasons, but one of them is the ability to get to scale much easier. From a Cargill perspective, why you have not seen as many public-private partnerships is that one of the key things I should have mentioned right off is that we are family-owned. For 150 years, the Cargill and Macmillan family has kept Cargill incorporated in the family, and that has led to very very Midwestern, pragmatic, just get it done. And so that notion of going and looking for public resources is not in our cultural DNA, or is it needed? It's a company that is well-resourced. So for us, that driver of what makes a good public-private partnership is not the money. It's about the other aspects that would be needed to make a market work. My colleagues have eloquently told you about the strains on the food system. I think this group here knows better than most. By 2050, we'll have roughly 9.7 billion people on this planet. We are seeing increased urbanization, and we have improved the outcomes of some of the poorest people in the world, and we have a significant emerging middle class. In the food industry, that means that when GDP increases, diets change. And that means that there is a increased demand for both protein and fats in the global food system. So for Cargill, what do we see? We see that these are some significant challenges. Couple that with some of the challenges that Dr. Kaufman mentioned about climate change, and we have some real hills to climb. And in order to do that, the global food system needs to be connected. It needs to be a food system where you have small, medium, and large enterprises coexisting and collaborating together. And that's where the opportunity from a Cargill perspective is. It's to strengthen those missing links and really focus on making integrated global value chains. That's not the same as vertical value chains, but it's really to make them work, because in many of the countries that we operate, in low-income developing countries, there are significant missing links, and that does affect efficiency of the global food system as well as food security. So one aspect, we've had a very good relationship with both the bank and IFC. I have to say, though, that from the private sector, when we have spoken to the bank in the past, it's very much a sense of, that's great, we work with governments, we don't work with the private sector, go see the IFC, which we have, and we've had a great relationship, and they've been very helpful. We have had the opportunity on a number of investments Nigeria being one of them, where we were exploring the market, where we were able to have more exposure to the bank. And I think that was a really rich, fruitful discussion about what we both could bring to that market and understanding the roles that we played and the mutual interest of having a strong market and strong governance and building capabilities in those regulatory regimes, because the private sector really does actually need a strong government and a governance system and rule of law in order for their businesses to work. So just a quick example of one partnership. Cargill is very focused in West Africa on cocoa. We are working with smallholders. It's a smallholder crop. And in order for us to be able to deliver on our commitment for responsible certified cocoa, we really need to find mechanisms and models that will help us achieve that. Building farmer organizations, in this context cooperatives, is really where we see that opportunity. It's where you can professionalize the system. You can, for Cargill, having a strong counterparty of farmers is really important. And in order to do that, you need to provide infrastructure, financing, and professional development. So we built our own co-op leadership program with some initial funding from donors and the company. That became a launching point, and IFC was part of that. And really one of the value that we found, and I know that across the bank there are many experts, but we had the opportunity to have experts at the IFC help us improve the methodology of that program and the curriculum, and that program is being implemented right now by TechnoServe. But that led to a relationship, and that's how Cargill starts. We'll probably start small with most partners, no matter who you are, because it's very much about a personal relationship, understanding the values, understanding how we can work together. Is it a cultural fit? Colleague from the Netherlands, we do a lot of work with IDH because a lot of my commercial people are Dutch, or they love that Dutch pragmatism of straightforward, let's just get to business, and it's important. And so this relationship with IFC, getting to know them, led to a program called Doni Doni, which I'm good on time. Yeah.
6.5 minutes.
Okay, good. Pardon me. And really provide an opportunity where we had a mutual interest of bringing smallholders into a mainstream value chain. But the financing and the support that Cargill had been doing on its own, we were able to leverage the growth of this cooperative independently, so that they were able to access new trucks and transportation assets, so that they could grow, and that this role and this link in the value chain did not have to be owned by a Cargill. It could be owned by independent, democratically elected cooperatives that were building an enterprise in a developing country. I mean, that's the ideal. I mean, we do not have an interest to be at all points of the value chain. We find ourselves in different instances engaging that space because there is a need. In order to connect the value chain, that link has to be closed. So for us, that is really interesting. When we can find opportunities or partners that are willing to think innovatively, think creatively. Sometimes working with an SME isn't as appealing because you've got a large portfolio and there's a pressure, we're done with proof of concept, we want to get to scale, we want to go big, we want to fund you or a larger company. The value for us is actually finding those opportunities where we can be perhaps part of the de-risking or the guarantor, linking guaranteed contracts from that medium enterprise, but building that local regional market is very important for us. Again, this is a slide from the IDH. I think you're all well versed in the public aspect of this, but from the private perspective, again, the needs for the private sector will vary. Small, medium enterprises are ones that are really struggling and having difficulty finding investment or funding. Larger companies like Cargill, that will not be the main driver. For us, having a partner in a market like Cote d'Ivoire, partnering with the IFC, having conversations with the World Bank, not only is it smart for building that agricultural system, but from a business perspective, it's a very volatile, uncertain market. And we've seen some very difficult times, from civil conflict to a complete rewriting of the cocoa reform, which turned upside down the entire global cocoa industry. So having a policy partner that is watching and seeing these developments is really important for the private sector, because sometimes it's not that you need an honest broker or someone to intervene in the market, but those that are engaging at a higher level on policy with governments, understanding really what is happening in the market, so that we all are working towards an enabling environment that is supporting good governance and a free market. So again, a few of the key perspectives from why the private sector would be looking at public-private partnerships. Particularly in new markets, it's an opportunity to leverage our own investments for growth. For Cargill, that's where we tend to have the greatest interest and appetite, because they're markets that we're entering, and we know that others have a greater insight and knowledge about them. It also helps de-risk. There's only so much risk a private sector entity will take. There is a ceiling on it. So having partners willing to de-risk in either an exploration or an initial investment is helpful. It also helps, as I mentioned, the enabling environment factor. Our 2/3 of our footprint is in the developing world, and in many of those markets we have, and I would say the developed world too, the biggest business disruptor to the private sector is government policy. So those that are willing to collaborate and work to better governance and policy is something that is of keen interest. And then obviously a company like Cargill, we have an interest in food security. Just quickly, the things that are sort of the downside, most of these companies do have, of my size, have access to funding. So it's a challenge on the reporting and the compliance that is expected from the public sector that's not on par with what is typical in the private sector. So that is really important that it's understood up front. It is a time commitment, and when there is funding involved for those companies that are looking for funding, it has to be put in perspective of where that is against what that company may be putting on the table. And then it's also measured against the ease of doing business, if I may borrow your own verbiage. I jokingly borrowed this phrase from another colleague from another company when we were at a global platform, an agriculture meeting that was meant to spur agricultural transformation in Africa, and the focus was on PPPs, and this colleague actually joked it was the private-private partnerships, because we were all waiting for the public to come along. We were waiting. Finally, points to consider about the private sector. Not all private sector are the same, as I've mentioned. Small, medium enterprises will be those that are most keen for resources. The larger ones will be looking for a much deeper conversation about the market, about infrastructure, about developing governance structures. Speak the same language. I think one of the things that when you're working with a private sector company like Cargill, understand where decisions on PPPs are made. It's really, in our environment, we really like it when the bank and others engage with our commercial teams in country, but they're speaking a different language. So in order to help facilitate those conversations, you should be reaching out to our corporate level, because we can help bridge that. These are individuals that do not speak development language, and they're very plain speaking, and you may be speaking past each other. So make sure you're leveraging those corporate individuals that can help bridge those conversations. Aligning on outcomes up front is critically important. As I mentioned, where private sector will be interested in some of these markets for partnerships, if it's not the big anchor investments and it's the average, they're going to be looking for managing their risks, whether it's that currency policy in that country and the forest risks to the company, or it's the actual marketing structure. That will help you understand where is that common ground, what's that driver for that private sector entity, and then of course getting back to rooting where we like to have this rooted is that our businesses must be engaged in the partnership. The only way they're going to be engaged is if it's actually rooted in their business strategy and where they're going, which for us is the other side of the coin of making it both sustainable and scalable. So thank you. Great, thanks.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Any questions for clarification for Elizabeth, particularly on this presentation? Yeah, over there. Can the mic travel to table 9?
Let's see, do we have a microphone coming up? That's great, thank you. Tell us who you are.
Thank you for your presentation. I'm Mariam Bamba from Côte d'Ivoire. I saw that you're working with your partnership with University of Yamoussoukro, and I would like to know the kind of partnership you have and what is the impact of this partnership.
It's a great question. So in Côte d'Ivoire, we have actually a number of partnerships with both academic institutions and even the government, the Conseil de Café de Cacao. And they've been actually involved in this collaboration. And the impact is to develop a professional development program to bring emerging farm leaders into another class of commercial leaders, to give them the skills and the training that they need to be able to be successful co-op leaders and manage transactions, and to be a strong counterparty with the Cargills of the world, so that when they say, we have this to sell and this is the price that we want, they're able to negotiate or say, tough, we're going to Bungie, or we're going to, not Bungie in this case, but we're going to Barry Callebaut. They are strong and healthy. So the university in this instance is a knowledge partner of how do we get this training and this methodology right, so that then this type of program doesn't just exist in the co-ops that Cargill's working in, but then can be cascaded across not just the cocoa sector in Côte d'Ivoire, but hopefully in other commodities.
One last question, perhaps? At the back over there.
Thanks. I just wanted to let you know that in India, in one of the bank projects in Bihar, actually there are women farmers, farmer producer companies who are directly selling to Cargill through an electronic trading platform. I wanted to know whether you have specific kind of partnerships ongoing in India in terms of the kind of things that you mentioned in the presentation.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, across all the markets that we're working in, particularly in developing economies, low-income countries, there are significant capacity needs of the rural extension services of the government. And so you have private extension services being done, not that that is an interest to be our business model or that we necessarily want to fill that gap, but from a business perspective, in order to be able to originate and secure the crop, you actually have to go down to farm level. And in that instance, in the women, that's not just in India, that's across the globe, that once our commercial teams get there, they realize that women are a good bet on business. And so that we've actually got a significant amount of training programs that are specifically targeted to women, getting them the knowledge that they need and getting them the training, because often women are excluded. But invite you to look at Cargill.com. We've got reams of them, and click on the India page. You'll be able to see some of them.
Okay, thank you very much. I want to invite you to do something else. You've been sitting and listening for a long time now. My proposal is that you take about 5 minutes to talk to your neighbor. And so you don't need to have a discussion around your full table, but just go to your nearest neighbor. You don't need to kind of switch chairs or anything. And kind of have a chat with this person. Have a chat about what struck you so far in this session. And it could be something you liked. It could also be something that perhaps you didn't see addressed or you didn't like. but start having that conversation.
Yeah.
And also, if you've got any questions you want to put to the panel,
Yeah.
please write them on the papers, and Stephen and his team will collect them after 5 minutes.
And one quick thing, 140 characters, try to keep them short. When you're done a question, put up your hand and we'll come and collect them. 5 minutes starting now.